So I was expecting there to be something like, Mary is black or Asian or trans or gay or something. And there's none of that.
I think the accessibility argument, I think, can be a little bit of a red herring. The way it's used as an excuse for adaptations that aren't faithful to the original text.
Mary, did you know that our PopCon show would rate your film so poorly?
Hello, and welcome to the Pop Culture Contrarian podcast with Thomas, Sterling, and Andrew.
Hello.
Hey, guys.
It is December here in our studio, and so we watched Mary, the Netflix movie about Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Supposedly.
In theory, it sounds nice.
That is what it's about. Whether or not it's accurate is something we will discuss.
Mary, did you know that your Netflix show...
Before we get started, remember to like and subscribe to us on YouTube, Spotify, wherever you find your podcasts. Hit the bell on YouTube so you know when a new video goes live. And yeah, so our episode today is about Mary, 2024 film, as Wikipedia calls it.
Also,
oh yes,
while you're thinking of it, go to the patriotpostshop.com.
Mm-hmm.
Christmas gifts.
We got Christmas gifts. These are some really nice mugs.
They are very nice.
These are handcrafted, so no two are exactly the same.
Yeah.
We also have coffee.
Mm-hmm.
And
Founder's Wisdom.
Yeah, Founder's Wisdom coffee.
Approved by Thomas Jefferson, John Adams, and Benjamin Franklin themselves. They sent us word from beyond the grave.
Yes.
The founding fathers believe the same thing about government.
Yeah, clearly.
Yeah, that's about as accurate as this movie was.
Are you suggesting I would say something that's not true, Thomas?
On that note, let's dig in.
Yeah. Okay, so Thomas, I'm gonna let you get the first word here because I think you have the most to say, possibly.
Well, yeah, yes and no. This movie is purportedly supposed to be about the back history, of course, which is not recorded anywhere, of Mary, the mother of Jesus.
Mm-hmm. The way I described it is it's about her life, all of her life, up until they take Jesus to the temple.
Okay, yeah. And but it's done by people who I would say are not theologians.
I think that's safe.
I would say maybe that's the most gracious way to put this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. From what I understand, the director's name is DJ Caruso. Mm. He is a Catholic, or at least he says that he's a Catholic. And then the producer is Joel Osteen.
The executive producer.
Yes, executive producer. You know, from what I understand, I don't know a whole lot about Catholic doctrine, you know, but I was reading about the kind of the backstory of Mary, and I think that they got some of these ideas about it. I'm trying to find what this thing is called. It's some kind of an account from James.
It's called James. It's not James the Apostle.
No, correct.
It's not the book of James in the scripture.
It's different.
So here it is. It's called the Apocryphal Proto-Evangelium of James.
That's right.
Which this book that was written millennia ago does talk about the early life of Mary, and that's where they drew a lot of the inspiration.
Yeah, so that's kind of where it's pulling from. Are we giving first impressions right now, basically?
Yeah.
You know, my first impression, especially right out the gate, not being as familiar with this doctrine as I just mentioned, was just be like, this feels like fantasy, just out the gate. Of course, as it goes along, it gets more into, you know, Joseph comes on the scene, and then, you know, they're traveling to Bethlehem, and those are more, you know, the account.
Yeah, later in the movie, you get more direct scenes from the Bible.
But to me, it just kind of started out like a Game of Thrones, Handmaid's Tale kind of thing. It was interesting.
That's not how I would describe it, but I certainly see where the Handmaid's Tale reference comes in, because there are scenes of Mary. They change her history quite a bit, or at least they say things about Mary's history that the Bible does not.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to briefly overview it, essentially an angel comes, tells her parents, hey, you're going to have a special daughter. And then they have a special daughter, and then they dedicate her to the temple, and then she has to go and live in the temple as kind of a nun, more or less.
Yeah.
If you're someone who reads the Bible regularly, her origin in this movie is fairly close to the origin of Samuel in the Old Testament.
Well, there's elements of it. There's some elements they definitely, you could say, pulled from in the story of Samuel.
I'll explain what I mean. In Samuel's story, his mother, whose name I'm blanking on at the moment, is barren. Hannah. Hannah is barren, and she prays to the Lord at the temple for a child because her husband has another wife who he loves more. And anyhow, the Lord...
No, he didn't love her more.
Well, he loved Hannah more, but the other wife had the children, which anyhow usually finds favor, at least in biblical times, evidently. Anyhow, the Lord answers her prayer. She has the child. She has promised that if you give me this child, I will dedicate him to the temple. And of course, that is what happened with Samuel. After he's a couple years old, she takes Samuel to the temple, and that's where he's raised.
Yeah,
so that element is pretty much what happens to Mary in this.
Well, similar. I mean, it's the tabernacle, not the temple, and it's Eli is the
high priest,
chief priest. So, I mean, there's elements that they pulled, you could say, from that. Like, I've not read this apocryphal account, and I don't know what the reputation of it is.
Well, the fact that it's apocryphal means the church rejected it.
Yeah. Well, but there can be, even some of the apocryphal books have historically sound.
Yeah. Like the first and the second Maccabees, I think, good histories. Anyway.
Right. I would say that even the Catholics generously would say this story is Catholic light. It's very, it hits on some things. I think where the Catholics have the doctrine of the Immaculate Conception, which doesn't refer to the birth of Jesus, it refers to the birth of Mary.
Yeah.
And there's a hinting of that, I would say, in this film, although it's not explicit.
Yeah, they never say Mary's without sin. I think if you watch the movie, there are things Mary does where you're like, okay, this is not something someone without sin would do, whether or not they're explicit sins or not. Yeah. I don't think you can watch this movie and say they're intending for you to come away thinking Mary lived a sinless life.
Yeah, one specific example of that is the childbirth, where she experiences pain in childbirth, and that is a symptom of original sin.
Right, so that's part of God's curse.
But Christ suffered real pain on the cross, and he was sinless. So
that is a good point, Thomas.
Well,
but it is different because of the woman's, the curse of the woman.
Yeah, the curse in Genesis is because you have done this, you will suffer great pain in childbirth.
Greatly increase your pain in childbirth. Is what it says. I would say that argument for why her experiencing pain, to me at least, wouldn't necessitate that she's therefore sinful.
Yeah.
I would say the curse is Jesus experienced even though he was sinless, the result of the curse in living in the fallen world,
bringing it onto himself.
Right. And so he just like the rest of us was fully human and experienced life in the fallen world. So getting sick, having, pain, things of that aren't a result of our directly doing sinful things, but are a result of living in a fallen world.
Right. We say we believe that Jesus was fully God and fully man. And if you're fully man, presumably sometimes you had the sniffles or whatever.
Whatever the experiences we have.
Well, the reason I mention that is because my understanding is in Catholicism, there's a teaching that the birth for Mary would have been painless.
Yeah, I'm not a Catholic theologian either.
Sure.
So to the point, I think it is like Catholic light or Catholic adjacent on some of these apocryphal accounts of her history, because Scripture does not speak to any of this stuff. Right?
So we're getting a little bit into the theological weeds here, which that'll probably continue, but it is inevitable. I'm going to give my first thoughts real quick. I went into this movie because it's Netflix. And if you're a watcher of the Pop Culture Contrarian, know we don't have a terribly high opinion of Netflix's adaptations of history.
Yeah.
So I was expecting there to be something like, Mary is black or Asian or trans or gay or something. And there's none of that. Culturally, I didn't spot any woke stuff in this movie at all. To me, it seemed like they were trying to balance between offending all the Catholics and offending all the Protestants and tried to make something that wouldn't offend too many of either group. And I was expecting it to be crazy woke Netflix stuff.
Yeah. Well, they did make Gabriel black.
Yeah, or
he's
not kind of Middle Eastern.
Middle Eastern, maybe so.
Yeah.
He's very dark. I mean, not that it matters. He's Gabriel. He's an angel. He can be anything, really, because...
There were some details specifically with Gabriel that I just It was an example of someone having their own ideas about what they would like to see, but that are very much divorced from the reality of the era and of the culture in which that would have been. For example, when you see Gabriel, he's got tattooed hands. Now, if anybody knows anything
I didn't notice that.
about Jewish Jewish Levitical law,
this is a really good point, Thomas.
There was God forbade the Jews from getting tattoos because it was a sign of it was a sign of them being pure and set apart from the cultures around them.
Well, the cultures also
why
mark
in the world
to remember the dead.
So it's supposed to emphasize their purity, set apart as a people. Why in the world would Gabriel show up with tattoos all the instant they saw that? They would look like they're I think, this me presuming, but I would think that's contrary to how they've been taught. So why would an angel show up in a manner that is explicitly in forbidden laws of God, displaying like tattoos? I think that would cause them to say, "Wait a second, what are you?"
I will agree. I think this movie is enjoyable. Just to get that out there. So I was saying, I was expecting all this. It didn't show up. I think it was enjoyable. It's something I might rewatch one day.
It could have been really bad.
It could have been really bad, and I was expecting it to be pretty bad.
My take was the other way around. I would say it could have been really good, and it just didn't.
Well, I agree. It could have been a lot better, but it's
this
Netflix,
is Netflix
so I didn't have
we're
high
talking
hopes.
about here.
Yeah.
But I will agree that the depiction of Gabriel is both wildly creative, to put it mildly, where they have Gabriel saying and doing things that are just not in the Bible. I don't necessarily believe the first time Gabriel appeared to anyone was, if it was Gabriel who appeared to Zechariah or Mary. Zechariah is who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
At this time is what I mean.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
I don't necessarily believe that's the first time Gabriel appeared in Israel around the time of Jesus' birth. I don't have any evidence that he appeared before then, though, because the Bible doesn't tell us that. But the Gabriel appearances are many, and there's a couple appearances of Lucifer, and it definitely could have been done a lot better. I was impressed that it wasn't worse. That was my take throughout most of the movie.
I mean, that's a fair assessment.
I guess so. I mean,
it was less bad.
Yeah.
it was maybe less bad than you expected. That's fair. My frustration is that at the very beginning, it sets itself up and then immediately does the opposite. And what I mean by that is you thought you know the story of Mary. Well, no, you really didn't. And now it starts going this direction. I'm like, you're not even consistent with what Scripture does reveal about Mary. And now you're going and saying, hey, and there's all this other stuff. And I think, to me, you're not okay. You're developing a fanciful fiction, and there's characters you've taken and from history, but you're just spinning your own kind of, taking little bits here and there and spinning your own story, and then presenting it as if this is a newly discovered or uncovered, or I don't know. I find that frustrating. To me, it's like you're saying they try to balance between offending Catholics and non-Catholics. That was an interesting way of putting it. I think it's kind of like regarding like Lord of the Rings. When somebody comes along and you know the lore, you understand the history, and they come in and they say, we're going to take this character, but we're going to put him in this time period 1,000 years later than when he existed. And then we're going to, you're going to object because you're going to say, wait, that's not how it works.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's similar to me in watching this and saying, hold on, you're adding elements here that honestly, I would say there's no even creative reason to do so. You can tell a story without having to embellish so much of this background that I feel like actually it's gonna cause people, at least like myself, to immediately start like resisting what you're trying to do. Yeah. Because I'm saying, I don't see how you're actually showing me any kind of believable depiction of who Mary was based upon everything you're kind of throwing in. That's, I think, obviously contradictory to what Scripture has revealed in some places.
Yeah. So, couple thoughts. You have me dead to rights there, Thomas.
Okay.
When it's Lord of the Rings, if there's anything wrong, I have an emotional, visceral reaction to it. I'm like, how dare you? And for some reason, I don't have that with this movie. It does not bother me, really. Maybe it's because my expectations were so low. Maybe it's because with Lord of the Rings or Star Wars or whatever it is, it can be ruined. It can be degraded to the point that it loses what I found valuable about it. I don't believe that about the Bible and about the story of Mary and Jesus. Those things are imperishable. And they cannot be ruined by any earthly hands, I don't believe. Maybe that's why. Maybe it's just I didn't take this movie that seriously to begin with, or I had such low expectations.
Well, my take was, I think that the fear I have as someone who, believes the Word of God to be absolute ultimate truth, and that through salvation happens through Christ alone, and your mission as believers is to share that message. And so anything that is going to make it harder or kind of confuse people about the truth of what the gospel is and who Christ is unhelpful. Now, people try to make this thing, well, maybe it'll get people interested. Yeah, God can use things in spite of themselves, is how I would put it. I think he can bring people in spite of bad theology, not because of... Not
just that, but I think anytime anyone's been brought to Christ because of the words out of another human being's mouth, God has been using them despite their broken and fallenness.
And that's fair. But there are words that are based more closely to the truth and or depictions, and those that are confusing and can actually lead people away. And so I think so on that element, I find it was a failure in that sense. But let's look at it as a film. Let's look at it as a film, like you were saying, you found it enjoyable, entertaining. So judging it based less maybe on the theological message or the historicity or historical accuracy of it.
Yeah, historicity.
Historicity is the term for that, actually.
Right. Yeah. What are our thoughts about the rest of this film?
Well, one part of the movie that I think is just A+, you did that right. I think that was a good depiction of this is King Herod.
Yeah, I would agree with that completely.
Yeah, it's King Herod in this movie is played by Sir Anthony Hopkins, who is, of course, a phenomenal actor. And the scenes where he is he appears throughout the movie, and the scenes where he is on screen, you feel, I think the verse in the Bible says, when Herod found out about the Messiah, he was greatly disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And you see why all Jerusalem would be disturbed when Herod was disturbed in this movie. Yeah. It makes it very clear.
Yeah, he is a narcissist. He's obsessed with building things, with heavily taxing the people in order to build things. He's obsessed with his own power and deposing anyone, even a baby, who would, or especially a baby, who would overthrow his stronghold on his throne.
Yeah.
Any threat.
Perceived threat. I think maybe I'm reading into it, but what I saw in the depiction of Herod was a man who is politically very savvy, probably Machiavellian is an accurate term.
Sure.
Who knew the Romans are more important in terms of me keeping my power than anyone in Judea or Israel. And so I'm going to do what I need to do to keep the Romans happy, and that's going to keep my head on my neck. And I think that's what he is depicting throughout the movie, is someone who's like, sure, I need to keep the Jews happy because I am their king, but I really need to keep Caesar Augustus happy because he's my king.
Yeah, that's fair. I think there was some good acting in it. Anthony Hopkins, like you noted, it was the majority of the actors I don't think I've seen in anything else.
Yeah, it was mostly...
I think he was the big ticket name, probably the one who cost the most to get on this film.
Certainly. Mary's mother, Anne, I've seen her in some stuff before.
Okay.
But yeah, otherwise, these are mostly people you haven't seen in much if you've seen them anywhere. And I thought the casting was quite good. The girl they had playing Mary, she is beautiful. She's not, supermodel pretty or anything, or maybe she is in real life, but not in the movie.
Yeah.
And you believe that this could be the girl that was specially chosen by God, I think, or this is what she might have looked like.
Yeah, she actually does look like Middle Eastern.
Yeah. No, I think that the cast presumably were, Middle Eastern, majority of them.
Yeah.
Look like they were from that region of the world.
I kind of liked the choice to go with a young Joseph. I thought that was good. I thought that was probably pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I know that the Catholic tradition is that he was old.
Well, the tradition from this proto-evangelion of James says he was old.
Yeah. It's. I think this is where I think the tough thing with trying to make, when you're doing any type of historic piece based on a certain period in history, I think the hard thing is being true to that and expressing that to a modern audience who has its own values and expectations for how people should behave and think. And I think that came through. What I saw was I felt like there was more of a modern attitude amongst a lot of the people, even though they tried to contextualize it in, first century.
There's a line that stuck out to me as that's not, I don't think, historically accurate. Maybe it is. Getting to this point I'm about to make, I will point out that this movie, one of the main themes is Mary she's shown as special throughout the movie, but she's also just a little girl who has been told you're gonna bear a child, even though you haven't had any kids. And obviously she's terrified because the law in the country at the time could have put her to death for being pregnant outside of wedlock. And her father gets very angry at her and she, has to kind of beg for him to support her in this. And I think that it's obviously extra biblical, but it doesn't seem inaccurate to me that might have happened. And so it's just the focus is on this girl who's having these amazing things happen to her. And how would you react? You'd probably be pretty scared. And she's pretty scared, I think, through a lot of this. So there's one line where she's in the temple where she's been promised. And then her mother comes to her and says, we've promised you to this boy, Joseph. And she says, you've just sold me off like one of our prize stallions or something like that. And I was like, I think she would have been prepared for this. Like, I think this is how marriages were done.
Yeah, culturally, that was a good point that I was thinking the same thing. The whole arrangement of marriages and the family being involved, and that was, I think, primarily how it was done. It's only our modern era where we have this notion of we as the individual go out and seek our own partner and basically we make all the decisions on who we're going to marry.
And that's very much the outlier in human history.
Right. It is.
That scene I just referenced stuck out to me, especially because it kind of clashes with the previous scene.
Yeah.
There's a scene where Mary is doing laundry by the river or something, and Joseph's on the other side of the river hunting, and he sees her and is struck with love at first sight and tries to swim over to her, and she runs away, of course. And he asks, what's your name? Just your name. And she says, I am the daughter of Joachim of Nazareth. And he goes directly to Joachim and asks for his daughter's hand, even without knowing her name. And it's kind of like Mary was knowing what she was doing, is what I thought when she said that, when she told him her father's name instead of her name. And then she's still surprised that she's being married off. I don't know. That seemed a little incongruous.
Yeah, there was part of the thing that's frustrating of them putting her like this nun character. I really didn't understand that element. And she's in the temple, and the temple is in Jerusalem. Nazareth is much farther north.
Yeah.
And so there gets confusing just in that scene. Where is she? Is she at the river near Jerusalem somewhere? Is she up somehow back up in Nazareth for some reason? She is supposedly dedicated to just being in the temple. There's just confusing ways of like depicting just even within its own métier, I guess. Yeah, right. That seemed inconsistent. So I was a little bit kind of confused. I thought they were setting it up for this love story and everything, and all of a sudden it's just like he just shows up and knocks, hey, can I have your daughter? So I'm like, oh.
Well, that was fast.
Really fast there.
Well, I expected that when she told him her father's name, but like I said, I was surprised by the later scene. Mm-hmm. There's not really any time spent on traveling, so that is a good point. You could get confused how close together are these places, because it's just, hey, you should go visit your cousin Elizabeth, and then she's with her cousin Elizabeth.
Well, they did depict her in this cart traveling across a big plain before she arrives.
Did they?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think to your point about the out of place, the stallion line, the whole point of this film, and I think the directors even said this, is to make Mary accessible.
Yeah.
So, I'm not really surprised to see that kind of thing, taking things out of context or just literally throwing the characters into
modern context.
Yeah. Or just they're down the road all of a sudden. I mean, they're just moving the thing along.
I will say, I know, Thomas, you feel differently than I do, but I think making Mary a little bit more accessible, making it feel to modern audiences, because that's who was watching this, that she was a real person who really lived. I think there's value in that. I I don't hate this movie. I'm going to give it a somewhat positive review when we get to that. And yeah, I do think we know that she was somewhat disturbed when she was told she's going to bear the Christ child, but then she celebrates and sings praises to the Lord in the biblical account. And yeah, I think it's totally reasonable for 14 is the age I usually hear for Mary, a 14-year-old girl to be somewhat terrified at learning she's going to be a mom.
Oh, yeah. I think the accessibility argument, I think, can be a little bit of a red herring. The way it's used as an excuse for adaptations that aren't faithful to the original text. Okay. But the thing is, being human and seeing another human is the most accessible element of humanity. You recognize somebody else. Now, cultural differences, of course, those exist. And how do you communicate through and via cultural differences? So you're communicating the ideas and thoughts you want to get across. I think that you can do that without making someone a modern type of individual and somehow saying, well, the reason I had to modernize this person was it was the only way to make it so that people could relate to them or something like this, that they would be accessible. I tend to think that that's just a cop out for bad writing. Honestly, when I hear that, I feel like, no, it's an excuse not to do the hard work of saying, how do I tell this story accurately and true to the story originally and make that person who lived back then alive? Yes, they may have had completely different experiences. They obviously did. However, we're human. And so in that, we're going to have things that are the same, just like cross-culturally. You know, we've argued this regarding the nature of sex, right? There's women and men in cultures all over the world throughout all of history. And they may dress differently. They speak different language and everything. But the notion that there's men and women is everywhere.
Yeah. Russians and Incans have agreed on that since the beginning of time.
Right. Yeah. And the concept of marriage, that's everywhere.
Yeah.
So there are things that we can still relate to and be, I think, relevant in. I think the notion of finding a spouse, falling in love, all these things, they may be expressed slightly differently in all these other countries, but I think that's common to the human experience.
Yeah. So moving to kind of a different theme, but it's connected to the things we've been talking about. The jeopardy Mary is placed in by carrying the Christ child is kind of one of the focuses of the movie. And it's kind of, I wondered if maybe they were doing that with the idea of reminding modern audiences of the issue of abortion and how scared lots of young women are when they become pregnant. Obviously, abortion's not even brought up in this, and rightly so. But Mary is put in jeopardy in this movie, at least, by carrying the Christ child. There is a scene where a mob is riled up by Lucifer, actually, to go and stone her. And Joseph shows up and they try to get him to start the stoning, and instead he defends her and runs away with her.
He would have been within his right to.
Yeah, illegally in that time, I think so, yeah. And on that, there's some other scenes where there's some violence that is not in the biblical tale.
Yeah.
Where Joseph fights with this guard of Herod's and stuff, and it's nothing too extreme. It's just to add some flavor towards the climax of the movie, I think.
They do end up fighting on the road with bandits.
Yeah.
At one point, which was interesting.
Well, I think those were King Herod's guards as well, actually, or something like that.
They seemed to me like they were like highwaymen because they ran off with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Were they?
I thought they were sent. I thought it was that's what it was. So the guard captain of Herod's tells one of the zealots, I guess, that Joachim is harboring a woman who's carrying a child out of wedlock. And so they go and once they kill Joachim, it seemed like that's when they ran away. I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, maybe so.
So yeah, there's some violence and stuff. Of course, there is violence in the true story where Herod, and this is depicted in the movie, not on screen and not violently, but there is obviously the jeopardy where Herod orders the death of all the male children in Bethlehem under 2 years old.
One thing about that was a little bit odd to me was he gave that order in the movie. He gives that order to kill all of the infant male children. And he also gives the order to bring to him the Christ child alive.
Yeah.
which
I think
that's not what happened.
Yeah, it's obviously contradictory because he says that in one breath almost.
Yeah.
Go kill all the
It makes zero
male children
sense.
under 2 years old and bring me the Christ child when you find him. I think they just wanted to have that scene because there's a scene at the end where Herod is standing over a whole 40 cribs or something with babies in them crying, and he's carrying a sword and threatening to stab them, trying to find out where the Christ child is. Are you the Christ child? Are you the Christ child? Obviously, the babies aren't answering.
Right.
But it's good because it highlights Herod's character and what he is willing to do to retain power.
Yeah, clearly he's a monster, self-absorbed and willing to do anything. No level is too low for him to stoop.
Mm-hmm.
But also at the same time, it was like, what's the point of killing all those babies if you're just going to bring the Christ child back alive?
Well, yeah, I could come up with some Machiavellian reasoning, but it's not in the movie, so I'll leave that aside.
Okay.
But anyhow, I think it's a pretty interesting movie. I think it is, I think it's pretty interesting. Do we want to get to the review part so I don't have to
let's just
stifle myself here? Okay.
Yeah.
Let's use our review scale.
Yeah. So we have a new scale we're going to be using, which is on 5 different points. The woke meter, how woke is it? Well written, how well written is it? Artistic value, aesthetic appeal, entertainment value, and then legacy score, which is how long is this film going to be in the zeitgeist? Will we be talking about it in 10 years? So,
and we're going to do a 1 to 5 or 1 to 10 on these.
1 to 10 is easier just for continuity, I think.
Okay.
So, Andrew, would you like to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. So let's go through them. Woke scale.
Woke scale.
I would give it maybe a 2. Maybe.
I mean, there's not nothing, but it's almost nothing.
There's a couple things here and there that you could say might be approaching woke, or at very least just modern context, but really no.
Yeah.
It's not a woke movie, which is refreshing, of course.
Yeah, it is. Especially for Netflix.
Correct. Yeah, most definitely. All right. So what's our next?
Well written.
Well written. Well, it was written all right. I would say I might give it a 3.
Okay.
Mainly just because I just didn't find the backstory fabrication very compelling. And then, like you said, Thomas, the instantly down the road kind of stuff, there's no in between. That was a little bit jarring, stuff like that. I don't know. Maybe I'll give it a 4. It wasn't awful.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Next is artistic value.
Artistic value, I would give it probably a 6. It was pretty artistically pleasing.
It's visually appealing.
Yeah. I enjoyed the cinematography, the music, the acting was good. So yeah, I'd give that a 6.
Okay. And next is entertainment.
Entertainment, for me personally, I'll give it a 3. I was not terribly entertained.
All right. And finally, legacy. How long do you think we'll be talking about this?
A 1.
1.
I think it gets forgotten about.
Yeah. All right, Thomas, you want to go through those real quick?
Yeah, I would. The woke meter, I'd put it at probably at least a 3. I think there were elements of feminism in it that were borderline pushing it. It didn't go full bore by any means. So yeah, I'll give it a. Did I say 4?
You
said 3.
I said 3.
Mm-hmm.
I'll stick with 3.
Yeah, well written.
Yeah, no, I thought the writing was a little bit. All the problems with whether or not historically had any accuracy was very weak. And I thought outside of that, I would give it a 2. It was not well, in my opinion. Artistic value is the highest one. I would give it. It is, they took advantage of trying to show a part of the world that I think is interesting, unique. You feel like the environment would have been like what it may have been like back then.
Yeah.
I thought that they did a good job capturing that feel. The costumes looked relatively authentic as far as I know, although I thought that the high priest head thing, crown, that I don't know how accurate that is.
I don't either. And I can't remember, were they wearing what's the name of the
ephod?
Were they wearing those?
Were.
Okay.
Yeah,
I don't know that I paid close attention.
Yeah, I didn't pay close enough attention. I was kind of distracted with that headgear. Mm-hmm. So the historical accuracy of the artistry gives me pause. I'm not sure how accurate that was, but I would give it a 6 as well. I thought on that point. Entertainment value, there are definitely elements that are entertaining in it, but I would give it a 5. Put it there. Its legacy, I'm with Andrew. I think this is one. I have a hard time. It's because, and it's not because it did such a terrible job, in my opinion, of historically giving you an accurate depiction of who Mary her upbringing and history may have been. That's not why. I do think it has more to do with this. It really wasn't well written. Mm-hmm. It's something that doesn't, some things are well written and they're going to have the staying power irrespective of the message because they're just so well put together.
Yeah.
This is not that. And so on that alone, I just don't think, I think 10 years from now, people are, if they say, hey, remember that movie Mary? People are going to be like, which one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably right. So I forgot to say this, but Andrew, you want to go ahead and give your cumulative score out of 10?
Cumulative score, give it a 5.
A 5. Thomas?
3.
A 3. All right. So I'll do this now. The woke meter, I agree. Very little hints here and there. I'll give it 1 to 2. I'd lean towards 1, honestly. I don't think it was very woke at all. Well written. So I think it's fine writing. I would give it like a 5, but it doesn't, and this is a point that some of the reviews we read mentioned, it doesn't actually make any, it doesn't have any messages. Yeah. It's just kind of like, here's a story of Mary, and it's, okay in some parts and not okay in other parts. And it's just kind of like, here's something. And it's like, oh, yep, that was something. And
what's the point? That might be the what you're getting at.
Yeah.
I would say is like, after you're watching it, you're kind of like, well, what's the point?
Yeah. So I'll give it a 5 on well written because the dialogue works and like the scenes work and they flow pretty well, but what's the point? Artistic value, I think it was an attractive movie to watch. The visuals are good. I really liked the parts of Herod putting the Roman eagle SPQR on the second temple. I thought that was pretty powerful and probably accurate. I don't know about that. It seems like something Herod would have done, though.
Plausible.
Yeah. Entertainment value, I think it's fairly entertaining. I think the scenes where there's a little bit of action work pretty well, but it doesn't feel out of place. And the scenes where it's just women sitting around and talking, which is a fair bit of this movie, probably passes the Bechdel test.
Oh, really?
Probably. I don't know for sure. I think it's pretty good. I'll give it like a 6 on entertainment as well. Legacy score, yeah. I'll give it a 2. I think some people might, watch this and then watch the Nativity movie or something like that, but it's not going to be an enduring classic by any means. And I'll give my overall score I'll give it a 6. I think overall it's a 6. It's nothing special. It's nothing terrible either, I don't think.
All right. So 6, 3,
and 5.
5.
So should you go see it? Meh.
You don't need to go anywhere. It's on Netflix.
Right. It's on Netflix. I think if you have a Netflix subscription and you were on the fence about watching it, and I think it's fine to watch. I don't think you're going to be totally incensed by it unless you're more like Thomas than like me. And I think it does show you some elements of Mary's life you might not have thought about and that are maybe worth thinking about a little bit. Is there a better way to present these elements? Yes. But
yeah. Yeah, I think there are probably other films that depict Mary out there that maybe, in my opinion, that could probably do a better job.
Yeah. Well, I think we can all agree sometime someone will tell a better story about Mary than this one because it's not a high bar to leap.
No.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that's all right. Oh, Andrew has something.
I have one thing to add. This is my closing thought.
Okay.
Mary, did you know that our PopCon show would rate your film so poorly? Couldn't resist.
So
I don't know if she wants this film.
Yeah. On that though, Thomas, you were saying that's not one of your favorite songs, is it? Mm-hmm. I was thinking about it. I bet the reason you don't like that song is because you know the answer is yes, Mary knew all those things in that song.
The first note of Thomas's version is yes.
That's the whole song. In case you're wondering, the actual lyrics are like, Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Yes, she knew that.
Yeah.
Gabriel told.
I happen
Gabriel
to like that
said
song.
so.
Yeah. I like the song too. But yeah. All right. That's our PopCon Pop Culture Contrarian episode for today. We are brought to you by the Patriot Post, which is the oldest conservative news digest on the web. It's right and it's free. Be sure to like, subscribe, and visit thepatriotpostshop.com. Get some coffee mugs and some coffee. And hey, maybe a 50 cal lighter too. There's some cool stuff on there. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.